the Within Orb podcast. Come get Within Orb. Hello, my name is Jenn Zahrt, and welcome to Within Orb, a production of the Celestial Arts Education Library, a podcast bringing people together around the love of astrology, books. Join me as I interview people about the astrology books that changed their life and practice. You can support the podcast at withinorb.com. Welcome to another episode of Within Orb, and today we're flying out to St. Paul to talk to Moon Zlotnick. Moon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jen. Glad to be here.
So awesome to finally, this is our first conversation that we've ever had yet. We've worked together for years in various avenues of astrology land, including the Mountain Astrologer, and it's been so awesome to work with you. So I get to ask you now about your favorite astrology books, and let's just get started with the first astrology book that you remember encountering.
So I have to kind of tip my hat to the A to Z Horoscope Delineator, because in 1974 and 1975, that was the only book in the public library under the heading of astrology. So I felt lucky to find it. And it was basically a cookbook where you looked up and you got little blurbs about this planet and this sign and this planet and this house. But it's not a favorite book of mine by a long shot.
Okay. What was one of your early favorites then?
Stephen Arroyo wrote a book, Astrology, Psychology, and the Four Elements. So I was able to find that in the 70s. And I loved the perspective because he was very psychologically oriented, which I am as a person. And I remember thinking there was so much wealth just reading about the elements. And I still use a lot of that to this very day.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. What are some of your favorite things that he does share about the elements that sticks with you?
I'm not sure I could exactly say.
Yeah.
But this idea that you have access in a very kind of global way to a person that you're dealing with, if they're mostly air and water, or if they're mostly earth and fire. It was that kind of integrative thinking that really helped me to move beyond kind of that more cookbook approach towards learning astrology.
That's awesome. That's so great. So if we were going to go to a deserted island, what would be the 3 books you would take with you?
Well, I would take the book that I'm working on completing right now. The working title is Death Charts, Using Astrology to Heal Grief. And this book is hopefully going to be published in 2025. And it really summarizes the study that I've been doing since 2015, working with people who have lost a loved one and using basically a chart of transits and eclipses as a way to bring both information and understanding to not just what was difficult about the loss, but ways that that person might actually find that they're growing beyond their expectations in years to come. And so this kind of organically grew out of, I never set out to learn about death and astrology, but I do have a South Node in Scorpio. So it's not completely foreign, but it came organically out of the experience of losing my twin in 2005 and having the chart from her last breath and studying that chart for 10 years. And then opening it up to my practice, my clients, to work with them on understanding what that death chart could bring to their perception of the loss and how to move through the loss with greater understanding and a different perspective.
Wow. What are some of the ways that you've seen those transits having effect with your clients?
So I just did a reading today for a woman who lost her husband. And it was in 2022, so fairly recent. But there were Uranus transits to her personal planets and an eclipse to Uranus. And in the time since the marriage ended, she is shocked at how much freedom she had given away to her husband and how many ways in which she's really living the life that she wished she had had, that she couldn't have while they were married. And so that's just like a really simplistic point of view, but very meaningful to her as somebody who kind of realized maybe she was making too many sacrifices.
Yeah. So it's interesting that we're recording today because it's the 17th anniversary of my best friend's tragic cycling accident. And so when you're talking about the death chart, would I be looking at her death chart to see 17 years of transits and how my relationship to her moment of passing has evolved? Or is that kind of the concept of the book?
No.
Okay.
So it's much, much more kind of simple than that.
Okay.
You take the date, place, and time as close of a time as you can get to what I call the last breath. So you really are taking the chart of a person's death and you're superimposing that on your natal chart and you're adding eclipses. And so you're looking at the eclipses before and after the death, and then the transits, because even though a transit happens during a time period, the impact of the transits can keep going and going and going. So you're looking at like each eclipse and each outer planet transit is kind of opening a door for you as somebody who can personally grow and benefit from that loss, not in the immediate aftermath, of course, but kind of over time.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing work. Thank you for contributing to the field in this way. I think that it'll help a lot of people. Have you been teaching this material at all, too?
So I am preparing for the OPA Retreat in October, the Organization for Professional Astrology, where I will be doing a 3-day seminar, which is a lot of teaching, but it will be a lot of ritual and listening to music and kind of healing modalities. So it's not too heavy, but this will be really the first. I've given an hour lecture here or there, but this will be the first kind of intensive teaching about the material from the book.
Oh, that sounds phenomenal. I actually want to go. I'm like, because I feel like, oh yeah, this could be a really amazing way to process some intense moments in life. And
yes,
it's so great to hear that you're going to be providing that for people. And
thank you, Jen.
I'm really wondering what will come of it too once you've had live students and what builds with this OPA retreat.
Right. Yes. I'm really looking forward to it. And I feel like I've created a really strong container so that people will be able to process what they need to process, but also learn the material as well.
Yeah. So we'll have a link to that retreat in the show notes for anyone who wants to sign up. That's so amazing that you can do that. So that's book one. What would you take with you with book number two?
So I think book two would be Saturn by Liz Greene.
So what is it about Liz Greene's Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil that would be your companion in this very faraway place?
First of all, I think Liz Greene is very, very brilliant. And there's a way where, because of her psychological or Jungian background, she's able to draw or connect archetypal themes to planets very, very well. But the reason I would choose it if I were headed off to a desert island now is that back in January, I took a fall and I broke my kneecap, which is bone, which is very Saturnian. And the healing is very slow. And there have been so many limitations, which is very Saturnian. So to be reading one of these brilliant minds on the lessons of Saturn.
Yeah.
Just, okay, right. Okay, I'm supposed to be patient. Okay, I understand that. I tend to move slowly. Yeah, that's true. I can understand that. So, it's kind of like just an intellectual support system that I would choose this book now for some of the things that I'm going through in my life.
Yeah, it's a little bit like a spiritual medicine.
Yes.
To read about it.
Yes. Kind of meditating on this energy that I have to really work with in order to kind of progress where I'm going next.
Yeah. At CAELi, I came across a book review of Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil when it first came out. in the 70s, and it was scathing. And it's become this book that so many people love.
Yes.
So I was really excited to read this scathing book review of someone who was just kind of like, don't even pick this up. It's just a bunch of psychological mishmash. And it's like, you have no idea where the field is heading now, right? Like, it's become such a classic.
And Liz Greene was very controversial in many ways early on in her career. And I remember going to a conference, and it was a no smoking event. But in order to present, they had to give her permission to smoke.
Oh.
So she basically chain smoked during her presentation. And I just thought, well, this is really quite an unusual person here, besides brilliance.
Right. Yeah. And it's sort of taking Saturn to another level in many ways, personally and professionally.
Yes. Talk about internalizing your own authority, right?
Yeah. I think Saturn does get a bad rap, and it's good to spend time really exploring some of those beautiful diamonds that come from all that pressure.
Exactly.
Imagine stepping into a room of 5,000 astrology books, turning a corner and stepping into a room of 2,000 more. The Celestial Arts Education Library is every astrologer's dream, and it can be yours. I invite you to come support CAELi before you can visit physically. Your support will mean the creation of 52 new episodes of Within Orb next year, 4 issues of the CAELi Review, our inaugural journal, and countless book talks, events, classes for our community. Visit our website, www.caeli.institute/support, to select your level of care. Please help support CAELi into the future, our future, so that we may study the future together. Thank you for listening. Please enjoy the rest of the show. So what would the third book be that you would bring with you to this remote place?
It's called Yesterday's Sky by Stephen Forrest. It's a book where he really goes into the reincarnation aspect with the nodes and goes through a very deep explanation and education about nodal patterns in the birth chart as reference past lives.
Yeah. So you have almost come full circle now to the death chart, and now we're talking about reincarnation. For people who are not fluent in that stream of astrology, can you kind of spell out some of the lessons from Yesterday's Sky to get us oriented with this vision of reincarnation?
So I think, along with Jeff Wolfe Green, Stephen Forrest is one of the kind of premier people to really teach about reincarnation as it appears in the chart. And I know that Jeffrey Green was more kind of Pluto, but I really like what Stephen Forrest does because he brings in the nodal patterns, not just the sign and the house, but how they relate to other planets in the chart, and kind of creates a story or a narrative for the client about the types of things that that person might have experienced in previous lives that could be contributing to places in their today life where they feel stuck or they feel kind of powerless. And in peeling back the layers of what those past lives might have involved, sometimes people can experience a real feeling of relief or release about places where they feel like, oh, I just worked so hard on this and it doesn't change. Like, why is it so hard? And so there's really this kind of evolutionary perspective that you spent a whole lifetime working on your nodes, and that it takes like as long as you have to really, really understand or delve into all the nuances that are within that natal pattern.
So how do your clients react when you're talking about past lives with them?
Well, everybody's a little bit different. I always actually ask them if they are willing to talk about reincarnation, because some people have had an unfavorable reaction to that.
Yeah.
But once they say yes, I mean, there seem to be a bunch of people who are really intuitive. So they kind of like feel that that's really right. Like they can really get into it. And almost everybody, especially the South Node, which has the connotation of being from the past.
Yeah.
But that's how I am now. That's me today. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's like the past isn't that disengaged from the present. They're really part of the same thing.
Do you see that then, like an arrow of time where the North Node would be pointing to something that is needing development?
Yes. Yes. And I don't see, so many astrologers seem to think that the South Node is bad and that the energy or whatever qualities you possess there, that, they're just like, oh no, you don't need that anymore. But I really see them as part of the same paradigm, basically, that they're part of the same energy pattern. And the South Node actually can bring forward a lot of gifts that people have developed in the past that can be extraordinarily useful in current settings. So,
yeah. How does that axis play a role in, I mean, I know that this is where eclipses happen. So in the book that you're still completing now, you bring the nodal axis into the picture, but is there a link between, a further link or some other kind of thing behind the nodal axis and your work with just circling back to the death chart? 'Cause I'm so still fascinated by that. So
yes. So the eclipses, I believe, bring into discussion. So let's say the karmic element of the death. A lot of the work that I do is based on the philosophy that when the soul kind of creates the contract to step into a particular birth chart, a date, time, place, that they're engaging the evolution of that chart along with the pattern of eclipses. So they're signing up for all of the transits, they're signing up for the progressions, they're signing up for the eclipses, and that the eclipses, much more than the transits, bring parts of people's lives over which they have no control, and that push them to grow and change in ways that are beyond the average repeating transits. For example, we use the client I saw this morning. So the eclipse before her husband died was making a square from her 8th house to Uranus in the 11th house. And she decided she wanted out of the marriage, but she couldn't leave him for financial reasons. She decided to stay. So in the spring, he died in the fall, but in the previous spring, she was kind of like so frustrated that she was thinking about divorce. But for financial reasons, she decided that she would continue. And then he just lived another 6 months. But I just thought that was quite remarkable that the 8th house was implicated. And, some people would say, okay, eclipses in the 8th house. Well, isn't that a theme about death? And of course it is. But it's also a theme about the square between her emancipation and the need for security and resources.
Yeah. And that these things aren't instantaneous either, right? It took time for this eclipse to have an effect over the course of 6 months. Wow.
But can I say one other thing?
Absolutely.
The eclipse that happened after he died was almost exactly conjunct her 2nd house, Neptune. And she found out that the house they bought, I don't want to go into the particulars of it, but in 2024, she's still trying to untangle the messy web of having to deal with the outstanding mortgages she didn't know about on that house.
Wow. Yeah. Which is, again, also actually relate. Whenever I see 8th house things, I think there's your mortgage. So it does relate in a certain sense. But yeah, that's impressive. Yeah, this, the linking together, because I think there's certain traditions of astrology that talk about reincarnation. And then it seems like there was a 20th century movement, kind of a counterpoint to the development of evolutionary astrology that would rather not think about the idea of reincarnation or chain linking lives. And so it's just awesome that you're focusing also on the way that different survivors of the deceased are navigating the transition point. It's not just this one moment of conversation around what you would get from yesterday's sky, but then it's pushing it to that edge, the liminal edge of someone's left, and now we need to navigate the forward path from here with that nodal axis as the conversation point too.
And with the eclipses as a starting point of that conversation.
So you would always look at the prior and the post eclipse or surrounding that moment.
Yes. And sometimes I'll do an eclipse, like if there's one immediately after the death, then I'll do the one 6 months later, because they will also sometimes bring up other themes that are really relevant in that kind of immediate period after somebody dies.
Yeah. And you're talking solar, correct?
Oh, yes.
Solar eclipses. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you ever looked at the shadow paths in addition to this work?
Well, when I started looking into that, I couldn't really find a relevance, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
Just because those paths travel all over the world, and
Sure.
the people that I was talking to were in a particular location, and it was not in the location of the eclipses.
No, I love that answer. I always like making things complicated, and you're like, don't. It's not that complex. You could, but why?
I always like making things simple because people have said to me, well, have you looked at the progressions? And of course, in my own chart, I looked at the progressions, and in the people I love that I do this for, I look at their progressions. But for my clients, there's so much there without the progressions.
Yeah.
So progressions reinforce what we can find out. And so I'm not writing about it in the book.
Yeah, no, I like that. Keep it simple, focused. And, if someone needs to extend it, that's a different book for another time,
Right, and I hope somebody else will pick that up and run with it.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. Well, I'm so excited to read this. And, circling back, just because I know we skipped a little bit through yesterday's sky, but did that book inform how you got into this first choice of the book you're writing now? Did that help?
Not really.
Okay.
So much of what I'm writing about is the direct experiences and the charts of the people that I've been dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And people have been more than willing to share their stories and, kind of read what I've written and make corrections. And so there are maybe 10, maybe there'll be a couple more really extensive case studies in this book that I think are really excellent teaching tools for people who are interested in learning.
Yeah. One other question before I ask you about books for beginners would be if you can work with this technique without knowing the chart of the person who's passed, or do you need that person's chart as well?
You do not need that.
Okay. Very awesome.
So the whole purpose of the death chart reading is for the person who's experienced the loss.
Got it. Wonderful. So if someone were wanting to get into astrology, do you have any books you would recommend they begin with?
I'm recommending old books that I came up with.
Yes.
So The Only Way to Learn Astrology by March and McEvers. They have volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. And the thing I like about those books is that they cover everything. And it's very kind of like building blocks. So you learn this part and then you build on that by learning this part. Like the aspects come after the signs and the houses and the planets. And so I studied with them. I feel like I studied with them when I was learning, and I really like how organized and well written they are.
Yeah.
And then the book Astrology for Yourself with Demetra George and Douglas Block. I had somebody a couple of weeks ago who was using that book to learn their chart because it's a fill in the blanks book. They present the material and then there are sheets in the book where you write it in about your own chart. And I think that is a great way to learn.
Awesome.
And the third book, The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest. He's so conversational as a writer and he's a great storyteller. And so it's not academic. It's just much more like conversational. And that helps people who can be put off by all that astrology lingo. So a lot of beginning students of mine like that book.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your books with me and talk about your new book, which I'm so excited by. I want to have you back actually so that we can do a book event for the launch of that book. And
thank you so much.
I hope you have the most amazing time at the OPA Retreat, carrying that material to live people. It sounds like that's going to be quite a special experience. So
thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate our time together.
I do too. And where can people find you?
Oh, astrologybymoonrabbit.com.
Okay, wonderful. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Within Orb. To learn more about the Celestial Arts Education Library, or to become a member, visit our website at CAELi.institute. That's www.caeli.institute. If you enjoyed this episode, please help spread the word. Follow or subscribe to Within Orb in your podcatcher of choice, rate it 5 stars, or write us a happy review. This helps others find the show. We also want to give a big thanks to the indie band The E-Block for contributing their song Wake Up for our intro and outro music. You can find them at their website, eblockband.com. This is Jenn Zahrt, signing off for now. See you next time.